Mila is 6 years old and loves the movie Frozen. Now, she can't actually see it, but she listens to it very closely. You know, Mila is your average 6-year-old in that she loves animated movies. And everything else about her is far from average. See, Mila's rare condition, Batten disease, has no known cure. And it leaves those affected with it blind, unable to walk or swallow. Mila probably won't make it past her teens. As her mother told the Denver Post of January 20th, 2017, usually I've been able to say to myself, that things could be worse. And this time, I can't. Now, bad luck could have dictated that any of us could have been in their position today. And some of us still might be. The National Organization for Rare Disorders, or NORD, explains on its website, updated daily, that Mila was born with one of 7,000 rare diseases, defined as any condition that affects less than 200,000 people. Yet collectively, they affect as many as 1 in every 20 people worldwide. As the Global Genes Project on its website, updated daily, furthers, because only 5% of rare diseases have any form of treatment, being affected with a rare disease leaves families broke and patients struggling with their symptoms. And considering that the NIH estimates that at the current rate of FDA drug approval, it's going to take 10,000 years to treat all 7,000 rare diseases. Let's change that by supporting rare disease research and funding. Now, I was born with autoimmune polyglandular syndrome, or APS type 1. It's a rare disease which affects 1 in every 3 million people. So, I'm going to do my best to try and explain why it is that we rare disease patients encounter difficulties, why it is that we often face misdiagnosis, and then I will outline some steps that you can start taking right here, right now, to support our community. Join me in the fight to improve care for rare disease patients. Because rare doesn't have to mean alone. Now, one of the major reasons that we still encounter problems with rare diseases is that getting research and funding is a nightmare. See, BBC of February 28, 2017 explains that the rising cost of pharmaceuticals and vast number of these conditions means the quest for a diagnosis could take up to 20 years. And NPR of January 17, 2017 furthers that researching and marketing a life-saving drug could cost billions of dollars. Which is why the Every Life Foundation for Rare Diseases explains that with only 326 FDA-approved treatments, 95% of rare diseases have no treatment whatsoever. So, for example, I take 48 pills a day. My calcium carbonate is used to treat my hypoparathyroidism. Without it, muscles like my tongue and my heart start to contract. But the thing is that none of my medications actually treat my rare disease. They only target specific symptoms. Now, not surprisingly, the cost falls on the families. As the aforementioned NPR explains, parents have to resort to working additional jobs, creating crowdfunding sites for their children, or starting their own nonprofits. So, as another example, the total cost of all of my treatments, with no copay, would be $58,000 a year. I know, I have expensive taste. Look, I'm going to be completely honest with every single one of you right now. I'm only one of a few patients of color that we know of with my condition, and that's only because I have been privileged to have parents enough who are wealthy to afford every single one of my treatments and even uproot their entire existence and move to America just for my sake. I mean, others like me do exist. But we just haven't spent the money to find them yet. Carol Morse's 12-year-old son Ryan began exhibiting weight loss, lack of energy, and darkening of his skin. classic symptoms of Addison's disease. It's actually one of the symptoms of APS1 and what causes the butterfly-like discoloration on my cheeks. Now, Carol didn't know what the symptoms meant, but she still pleaded with Ryan's doctor to check his blood levels and weight, which would have led to the Addison's diagnosis. But instead, the doctor just looked at Carol and said, "I'm the doctor." Said he only had a virus and sent him away with some pills. And Ryan died 4 weeks later of an undiagnosed adrenal shock. Cases like Ryan's happen because doctors routinely overemphasize symptoms in diagnosing diseases. And while this approach does work in traditional medical settings, for rare diseases, symptoms aren't as important. Because as the aforementioned BBC explains, 80% of rare diseases are genetic in origin and identifiable through the right genetic test. Further, Forbes of December 15th, 2016 explains that because the parents are the ones who spend the most amount of time with the rare disease patient, it's those caregivers who become the experts on the condition. But most doctors will still routinely ignore the parents' perspectives, which is why the aforementioned Global Genes Project explains that 40% of rare disease patients were misdiagnosed more than once, and that 44% explained that because of that slow diagnosis, treatment was delayed, and it negatively and permanently affected their health. But diagnosis can help bring those forgotten out of the darkness. Now, ever since I was diagnosed, my parents and I have been fighting nonstop to make sure that rare diseases are more recognized in the medical literature. But I'm a small guy. And I'm gonna need some help. You can help me by first fundraising for rare diseases. So, consider hosting your own serving awareness dinner. The whole idea is you're gonna invite friends and family over to your house for dinner one night. And whatever money they would have spent on food that night, they instead give to you to donate to the Rare Disease Foundation of choice. I actually hosted one for my forensics team just a few months ago. We ate some of my mother's delicious homemade Colombian food, and we talked about this speech and about APS1. So, I have a card here created by the APS1 Foundation explaining how you can host your own dinner. See me after the round if you'd like a copy. Next, let's all work together to raise awareness about rare diseases. I have digital copies of guides from NORD on how to get diagnosed and tested. So, for example, the usual cost of a genetic test is $1,500, but should be covered by insurance. So you don't actually have to wait for symptoms to appear at the beginning of any condition, so go ahead and take one. I also have, copies of medical information sheets about cortisol, the adrenal crisis episode that I mentioned about earlier. You can adapt it to your own medical condition, so if you want to see how to make one yourself, see me after the round as well. Oh, and 2 more pieces of advice. Number 1, don't be afraid to trust your gut. Odd symptoms can lead to a diagnosis. They're not always irrelevant. And number 2, don't be afraid to disagree with your doctor or seek out another medical opinion. It took me 14 years and 3 different countries until I finally found the amazing team at the NIH. And finally, because 60% of rare diseases, including my own, manifest during childhood, I have written and illustrated a children's book on what it's like to live with a rare disease. Now, the book is called Super Rare because it uses the metaphor of the superhero as mutant, as an allegory for rare diseases to tell children with rare diseases that it is a livable condition and that one can make it through with it. I'm in the process of getting the book published right now, and when I do, I'm gonna donate every single cent that I make towards rare disease research. So if you have any spare cash lying around right now, find me after the round and we can make the donation together, directly to the book or to the APS1 Foundation. Although I can give you a sneak peek of the book just for free. Look, now you know someone with a rare disease. When I was 1 year old, I got some rashes. And that was the beginning of a 21-year journey diagnosed with APS type 1, a rare disease which drastically affects my immune system and my life expectancy. Even with an activity like forensics that I've been doing for 8 years, at any given moment, my memory, my articulation, my energy could change with any warning because of my APS type 1. But I have found no better support mechanism than the forensics community. So today I told you why it is that rare disease patients are so often ignored and what you can do to help us out. For my part, I am advocating for those who haven't been as fortunate or as lucky as I have been. So please, help me talk about rare diseases.